America. Red, white, and blue. Apple pie. Muscle cars. And the Second Amendment, baby. I think here in America, we pride ourselves on our gun culture, and I think rightfully so. I don't view our gun culture as a bad thing. There are certainly bad elements in the gun culture, but there are bad teachers and doctors and many other things. I think also here in America, we have a rich heritage of riflemen, of good riflemen. It's not unique to here. I'm sure there are similar cultures in South Africa, Australia, but I think we pride ourselves here in America being a nation of riflemen. The individual rifleman. A man and his rifle against the enemy. I think noble and romantic ideas. I think something that we should embrace and hang on to and be familiar with. How does one become a modern rifleman? A modern day rifleman. Skilled, competent, safe, and effective. That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. So saddle up for the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, defense of life, use of force, tactics, ballistics, all manner of things. The right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm going to do a different bio than normal. If you want to skip it, you still can, but to establish some bona fides with the rifle. I grew up a poor boy in the South putting meat on the table. Running around with a rifle, probably so young that if I said how old I was, it would be clamoring for CPS. But it was a tool for me to put meat on the table for the family. And I took pride in that. And I took pride at being a skilled rifleman. Even way back then. Long before I joined the Marine Corps. And I joined the Marine Corps at 17. And even long before that, I started competitive shooting. Now, I've done most of my competition shooting in latter times with a handgun. But I started off with rifle as a rifleman. And traditional rifle craft. Back then it was 4 position, standing, kneeling, sitting, prone. Won my first gold medal before I joined the Marine Corps at 17 in rifle. And I don't know how many, I had a box of trophies that I threw away. But I've lost track of the number of shooting competitions God has blessed me to win with the talents and gifts that He's given me. Not because I'm special, but because God chose to give me those things. And to he who has more shall be given. Well, I joined the Marine Corps at 17. Now it's said that every Marine is a rifleman, and I would agree with that. But infantrymen especially are riflemen, right? Are you talking about an 0311 or in my case an 0351? MOS that no longer exists, but specialized infantry. And not only was I a rifleman, I was an expert rifleman. I qualified expert in the United States Marine Corps. Iron sights out to 500 yards. I'm speeded up because if not, it'll be a long bio. After my combat tours in the Marine Corps, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard, primary MOS infantry. Again, some street cred with the rifle there. Also served in law enforcement, LAPD, regular assignments, and more specialized assignments. I did use a rifle in law enforcement, several different ones. Also been a private contractor, a mercenary, whatever you want to call it. As you might imagine, used a rifle. Although I took respites from hunting, I have hunted ever since I was a very young man all over this wonderful country. I've been blessed to be a professional big game hunter and guide. Hunt and slayed all manner of beasts all over this country, both for putting meat on the table and as a professional hunter and guide. Also, the last competitions I did pre-COVID, I was the West Coast Regional Rifle Champion for American Marksman. I think that was 2018. But anyway, I was the rifle champion from all the way down from Hawaii up to Alaska and all the way as far east as Montana. I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. Not only did I qual and take rifle training seriously, I developed the program. So I was the one that wrote our policy, not just like uniform policy and use of force policy, which I did, but also wrote the policy for the rifle, how it was to be deployed, how it was to be used and carried, and overt and covert ways, rifles permitted and not permitted, what was effective, what was not effective, all that stuff. So hopefully that's enough bona fides for me as a rifleman. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. That's Psalm 144 and Psalm 18. It is God who arms me with strength and makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. And the Gospel of Luke, from the mouth of Jesus, let he who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. With that, let us roll into being a modern rifleman. I like all manner of things. I didn't mention, but I have competed in like black powder shoots and rendezvous, like mountain man type competitions, and I really like those. I would not consider them super practical for today's day and age. And this is actually really hard to quantify. I've been working on this a long time. Some episodes, if I'm just talking about like a cartridge, I'll just open up ballistics books or whatever, think about it for a little bit, and then talk. There has been a lot. You might say all that experience that I mentioned, so decades worth rolled into this episode. But more specifically, a lot of thought and internal debate. And a lot of work, actually, like going out in the freezing cold, literally 20-something degrees, out doing range training and trying to come up with a good training regiment and course of fire so that we, as Americans and others too, can get out there and be modern practical riflemen. How does one do it? What are the skills necessary for a modern practical rifleman? And by doing that, obviously, I looked at some of the training that was out there, and I think some of it falls short. And not because of it being bad training, but just because it's being dated. Much military and law enforcement training is usually 20 years behind. You can get mad at that or whatever, but that's just a reality, right? I'll give you an example. Competition shooters have been using red dots on pistols for how long? Decades and decades. They've recently become acceptable in law enforcement in the past 5 years. When I joined LAPD, I was still taught the Weaver stance for shooting a handgun. They were talking about the aughts. I started getting into serious handgun competition and realized how I thought I was a good handgun shooter when I was a police officer. And I actually went to an actual competition, even a local competition, and got spanked and humbled, which I needed to open my eyes to realize that most cops aren't very good handgun shooters. And realized that really no top shooter in practical handgun shooting had shot in the Weaver that wasn't the common stance for decades. Or how about the LPVO? I was using LPVO in competitions and in law enforcement, although it wasn't common, way before it was common to see one on an AR or a modern fighting rifle. Again, in the aughts, that hasn't been accepted in military and law enforcement until much more recently. So again, just to illustrate that most of it is behind the curve. I looked at the U.S. Army Qual, and I think that was designed for the Cold War era. You're worried about, and the Army doesn't say that every soldier is a rifleman, but soldiers are trained how to shoot. They're trained how to shoot a rifle. I would not put them on the same level as the Marine Corps as far as rifle craft, but it's a good place to start, and I was thinking about that for a citizen. But I don't think it's as good as it could be. Most of it is done in a prone, supported, or unsupported position, shooting off of sandbags, which makes sense for a soldier, right? Especially for soldiers that aren't infantry, because infantry is going to get a lot more training in a rifle. Like your convoy gets overrun, and you push out and get in some kind of tactical dispersion and guard the convoy. Or your base is getting overrun, literally. You run up and take up a position of cover and return fire. And the Army course of fire is basically like a battlefield of targets popping up at varying distances. And I think while that was Cold War practical, I don't see it as practical for a 21st century modern rifleman. Likewise, the Marine Corps. And that's probably more practical and good rifle craft. However, it's not attainable to the common man. Most of us don't have a 500-yard range. And even if we did, most of us don't have the infrastructure or the training to shoot at each other. And if you don't know about Marine Corps rifle training, you shoot at each other. Not to hit each other, but you literally have a guy down there lifting and lowering the targets and scoring a target, getting shots fired over his head. I think that's part of the training to get you ready for combat, which makes sense. But I'm not going to recommend that here on this show, right? Marines are kind of a different breed. But I think I've also, as you might imagine, had quite a bit of formal training in rifle as a private contractor. Actually, some really good training. Also, as the commander of that tactical team. And as you might imagine, I've conducted and given much rifle training over the years. How can I take all that, jettison the less useful for the modern man areas, but still keep the core, still keep the good, important stuff of being a good rifleman, having the skill of rifle craft, which its foundation, of course, of all things, is God. The number one manual for everything, for life, the Bible, right? The rifle is a weapon, and you should know when and how to wield a weapon rightfully and righteously. And I think you get that nowhere else but the Bible, but the Word of God. And then after that, the foundation, on top of that foundation, on top of that cornerstone, is fundamentals. What are the fundamentals? The fundamentals of marksmanship. We got to keep those, right? If you want just a feel-good, go out to the range and do a mag dump on a B-27 silhouette target at 5 feet away, this is not for you. And there are plenty of people I know and people that I love that are like that. They just want to go to the range and turn money into noise. And they want to go and feel good. They want to go check a box. And if you want to go do mag dumps at a giant silhouette target at a couple of feet away, this is not for you. This is going to require at least a grasp and understanding of the fundamentals. Stance, grip, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, breath control, follow through, self-diagnostic ability, natural point of aim. And I think that's a big reason I'm so passionate about this, and I put so much work into this. Arguably, there's more Americans with more rifles now than ever. But a lot of that is marketing. Thinking that, or I would call it being an Amazonian. Like thinking you can just buy something on Amazon and it checks a box and makes you okay. Makes you good for that thing. I bought a bunch of stuff on Amazon and put it in a bug out bag. Ergo, I'm ready for The Walking Dead for reals. You haven't actually gone out and lived in the wilderness. You haven't actually done the things. It doesn't make you really ready for anything. It just means you have stuff. It's kind of the new American way. See the same thing in guns and let's say, gun marketing. What's a brand new cartridge? This is probably a good cartridge. The 7mm PRC. If you don't have the 7mm PRC, you might as well be out there hunting deer with a slingshot. Like, what are you doing? You might as well be lobbing rocks out there. If your bullet doesn't have a .50 BC or better, you're just wasting your time. The people go out and buy and spend their money on something when they haven't even shot the thing that they have to its fullest potential. Or, the real-life operators use this M4 variant with this optic and PEC, whatever the generation they're on now, and IR laser and all that. And if you get this stuff, you'll be an operator too. But you won't. You'll be a dude with a rifle. And I'm not doing this podcast, or especially doing this episode and this training to make you a dude with a rifle. All you need for that is money. Then you'll be a rifle dude. You won't be a rifleman. Here's an example. I can go out and buy a piano. I can go out and buy whatever piano Billy Joel plays with. Billy Joel, right? The piano man. The piano man. If I buy his exact actual piano, if I somehow had millions of dollars and he was willing to sell it and I bought his piano, that wouldn't make me a piano man. That would make me a dude with a piano. The fact that you have Rifle X, it doesn't make you effective, it doesn't make you competent. It makes you a dude with a rifle and not a rifleman. You getting out and getting a grasp of the fundamentals that we talked about. Trigger control, sight alignment, things like that. Knowing how to load your gun competently under stress. Knowing how to shoot out of solid shooting positions, not off a bench. Again, the fact that you have a rifle and you can set it on a bench, on a bipod, in a rest, in a vise, or off a tripod, or whatever, and shoot a tiny group, that doesn't make you a rifleman. That makes you a dude with a rifle. That means the rifle can shoot a tiny group off a bench. That doesn't mean you can do it in real life, practical scenarios. That still doesn't make you a rifleman. It makes you a dude with a rifle. Now, it is good to have that bench rest shooting ability, be able to shoot a small group off a bench. That is good, and it is good. It is essential to have your rifle zeroed and know where it shoots, and have the dope meaning information on your rifle and where it shoots. But that still doesn't make you a rifleman. A rifleman is skilled with the art and the science of rifle craft. That is the goal of this training, this course of fire, for a 21st century armed citizen of all types, whether it's a civilian citizen, law enforcement, military, private contractor, church security, from a rancher to an urban yuppie that takes the preservation of life and liberty seriously, to be well-regulated. To be a well-regulated rifleman in the 21st century. A modern rifleman. That's the goal of this training. A lofty goal, and I know many out there won't do it. And there will even likely be many out there that agree and nod their head and they listen and won't actually do it. And they'll just be a dude with a rifle. And not saying you have to do this training to be a modern rifleman. Go take an actual training class, right? Go to PFC, Progressive Force Concepts, and take one of their good fighting rifle courses. And I don't know if they even know this podcast exists, but out of all the training I've had and that you can get as a civilian, I think PFC is probably some of the best that I know of. But go take an actual rifleman course. And again, not one. There's plenty of classes where you can go and spend money and run around in tactical kit and turn money into noise. And that when you leave that class, you could still be a dude with a rifle and not be a rifleman. Not be skilled at the art and science of riflecraft. But I encourage you to take one of those classes. You can do both. But I'm not saying this is the only. I'm not even saying this is the best. But the goal of this was to give those talents and to give a metric for whether someone is a rifleman for the common man. For anybody. Law enforcement, military, private contractor, civilian, church security, truck driver, farmer, whomever. Whatever man wants to become a rifleman. Without a ton of infrastructure, without a super long range with pits and moving target stands and a support team. That's the goal of this training, this course of fire, and if you want it to be for you, qualification. That's the goal, and I think a lofty goal, but one worth pursuing. Generally, things worth putting time and grit into are hard, right? So, and this is no different. If you're already a really good expert rifleman, this might not be hard for you, but for the dude that just owns a rifle. There's going to be a lot of work put in, I think, to even pass this, let alone qualify expert in it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about not the exact stages of the course of fire, the training, but what is it? What is it trying to do? Okay, we talked about the fundamentals. You will have to have a decent grasp of the fundamentals to even pass this. Obviously, you should have a firm grasp of firearm safety before you even attempt it. And you'll need a decent grasp of the fundamentals before you pass it. This is one of the reasons that I like shooting. The target is honest. The target doesn't care about your feelings. Despite our garbage culture that we live in today, if you feel like this, then you can be whatever you feel. It's okay, little Johnny, you feel like a girl, well, you can be Susie, but you can't. That's not real. That's garbage, stupid philosophy. The target is honest. The target doesn't care how you feel. The target doesn't care that you really, really feel like you should hit the target. You really feel like today you're a rifleman, so you're going to hit the target. Rifle don't give a crap about how you feel. Also, the target doesn't care how much money you spent on your rifle. You could have a $4,000 kitted out, super nice Scar, which is a fantastic rifle. Fantastic rifle for a modern rifleman. And you could show up with all that money and all the stuff and all the really feeling like you feel like you're a rock star with a rifle and you feel like you're really good with a rifle. Target don't care. Whereas blue collar guy shows up that actually trains and knows the art and skill and science of being a rifleman, shows out with his rednecked out SKS. Could shoot expert on this Qual. Could shoot expert on this course of fire. Because the target don't care how much money you spent. Now, you're going to need a decent accurate rifle, and I don't know that all SKSs would pass this, but if you had a good accurate one, it could pass this and shoot expert. And I'm not going to act like money can't buy force multipliers to a point. Like a good optic is a force multiplier. But this training was designed so as any decent modern rifleman's rifle, and I did a whole episode for the patrons on what a modern rifleman's rifle is. I may do one for the general audience at some point, but the patrons, it's already been recorded for them. But if you have a modern rifleman's rifle, you could pass and qualify expert, I think, on this course. This course was not designed to be a test like I think sometimes 3-gun has become on how much money you can dump in a rifle. It is designed, you need a good, functional, practical, and accurate modern rifleman's rifle, yes. But it was designed to be able to be shot and passed with a vast array of modern rifleman's rifles. For instance, I alluded to the SKS. Many, a modern rifleman today, that's their rifle, an SKS. That's what they have. Especially in Canada. It's one of the few semi-autos I think that they can readily attain and have and own. Right? You could pass this. If you're good, it's not going to be as easy. I don't think this, and don't misconstrue this, I'm not saying that the SKS is the battlefield equivalent of a good M4 or a good Scar 17. It is not. It is not. This course of fire is not an evaluation of rifle battlefield effectiveness. I would have an entirely different metric for that. This is an evaluation of your skills as a rifleman. I'm not going to argue and say it wouldn't be easier to shoot better with a good M4 with a good optic. It certainly is, because I did it with 2 different rifles, and I did shoot better with a good modern M4 with a good modern optic. But it's designed so that you can shoot, and you can do well with a vast array of modern riflemen's rifles. SKS. What's the most prolific, probably worldwide, modern rifle today? The AK-47. I didn't say America, I just worldwide. The AK-47. Right, you could shoot this if you have a decent accurate with decent ammo. Maybe not Tula, but decent ammo in your AK-47. You have a good, not, and here's a big misconception on AKs for a brief rabbit hole. Not everything that looks like an AK and barks like an AK, bites like an AK. A good, like, Russian-made or, Polish or something, good military AK is a fine weapon. A lot of the stuff that we have here in America is not. It is not the equivalent of an actual AK-47. Like an actual, like, Russian, back when they were making good stuff. Like back before the Soviet Union started tanking AK-47. Like a really good, well-made AK-47. But everything that looks like that is that. But if you have a good AK, you could pass this course. You have a good Mini 14, you can pass. You could shoot well on this course if you have a good Mini 14 set up properly. I'm not saying this is a good battlefield weapon or a good defensive weapon, but I designed it in such a way as you can train with a 22, because I'm a big advocate of training with a 22. All the skill, hear me now, skill, not ability of the rifle, not the ability of you in a defensive scenario or a martial application, but all the same skills you can execute on this course with the 22. In fact, the first time I ran, I designed it took a long time to design this, guys. A lot of effort went into this. I hammered some things out, wanted to make sure, and there were some minor tweaks after actually going out and shooting it. But the first time I shot it with Ruger 1022. A Ruger 1022 that I had my mom buy for me before I was old enough to buy guns, way, way back in the day. I remember it was at Walmart, and I believe it was $189 for a stainless steel Ruger 1022, which I still have. Iron sights. That was what I first shot this Qual with. This course of fire, this training with. It was designed that way. So if you have a good, decent, practical, and especially analogous to your modern rifleman's rifle, like proper centerfire, full-powered rifle, you can train and shoot this much more affordably, get good at it, do a bunch of practice with it with the 22. Again, this is not a test of how well the weapon you're using will do on a battlefield or in a home defense scenario or as a truck gun. It is a training course, if I can call it that, that is designed to give you and maintain the skills you would need in those situations to apply with your rifle. You could even shoot this with a scout rifle. Now, it was crazy cold the day when I went out to the range, like between 20-something and 30-something, and not a lot of sun that day. It was freezing cold. I did not get a chance to run it with a scout rifle, but I designed it in such a way as you could shoot it with a scout rifle, a bolt action. You kind of handicapping yourself, but if you wanted to, you could shoot and do well on the course with a scout rifle or with a lever action 30-30. And again, I'm not saying they're the battlefield equivalent of an M4 or a Scar 17 or even a FN FAL. But you could shoot this course of fire with them, and if that is your gun, like if because of legislation or whatever, you're limited in your go-to modern rifle that you have, that you train with and hunt with and whatever with, is a lever action 30-30, you could shoot this course of fire with it. Also, I wanted something that most people in most places could actually do and complete, which means probably not a 500-yard range. Now, thankfully, the U.S. Army has an alternate Qual, I assume for when they're in places where they don't even have a 300-yard range. I think it's a good thing. They have an alternate Qual, and what it does is you shoot the entire course of fire at 25 meters. And it's shot on reduced-sized targets, reduced-sized silhouettes. And that approximates the same, obviously not the same trajectory, you're not going to have the same wind effects, but the same fundamentals because you're shooting on a reduced-sized silhouette. So the target would appear as it would to you, the shooter, at 25 meters, at 300 meters, or 250 meters, or 150 meters. You get the idea, depending on the size of the target. And it's a large printed target with different size silhouettes on there. It's the U.S. Army alternate Qual C. I will try and remember to put a link in the show notes. But if not, you can get these targets. They're made by Right in the Rain, especially if you're going to shoot outside. I'm not sponsored by Right in the Rain, but it's like a wax paper target. just like the Write in the Rain notebooks, which are really good. You can order them. Like, you could get online and order them. And again, ordering the target is not going to make you a great rifleman. You actually train with it. But with that allowing you to get those similar skills, especially for the marksmanship, the fundamental skills, you can train as if you were shooting at 300 at 25 meters. Also, for many people that have any kind of yard at all, you can dry fire this. And you know I'm a big proponent of dry fire. You could dry fire this course in many backyards and keep those skills sharp if you can't make it to the range as often. So you can still develop, keep, and maintain being a modern rifleman with nothing more than a 25 meter range needed and this target. And this target is U.S. Army. It's attainable. They're not that expensive. And I don't know, there's probably ways you can get it besides Right in the Rain. There's probably just regular paper targets you can get. There may be other companies that make it. That I don't know. And it's like many other things, the more you buy, the cheaper they are. So if you want to go in with a buddy or you just want to buy a bunch of them at once, they'll be cheaper. But even the 10-pack of these targets is, I think when I checked, $15.99 or something like that. So the cost of the targets is not nothing, but it's not, I don't think, if you own a rifle and you regularly shoot and practice, it's probably not cost prohibitive, right? It's not like I'm telling you to go out and buy $500 worth of steel targets. It's a good target. And again, it's the U.S. Army alternate paper Qual. To be exact, M16A1 series targets, 25 meters alternate Course C record fire qualification. Would I design that target a little bit different if I were designing it? Yes, I would. But then it wouldn't be attainable to most people. The fact that it's readily available is the big reason I chose it, and the fact that it already approximates targets at the different distances. The ability to have and put into practice and test your marksmanship fundamentals as a rifleman in different positions, I think, is important. And what are relevant positions? The classic, which I learned, standing, kneeling, sitting, and prone. I'd say sitting, you should still learn it if you want to. It still comes in handy sometimes, but I scrubbed that. No sitting on this. Standing, I think for most people, for most modern scenarios, wish I could find stats on this, but I imagine if you looked at the GWOT, Global War on Terror, over the past 20 years, and look at the number of conflicts and the positions that people were in, the majority of shots would be taken standing. Standing is a big part of this. If you only ever shoot off a bench, you're not going to like this course of fire. If you just want to be a dude that shoots a rifle off a bench, then be a dude with a rifle that shoots off a bench. If you want to be a rifleman, you got to learn how to shoot that rifle standing. Standing unsupported. A sling is part of a modern rifleman's rifle, I believe, and you certainly can use sling and sling tension, whether you want to use the traditional sling or the military loop sling or a Rhodesian sling or a Ching sling or a more tactical like Magpul sling. I don't care. You learn to shoot the sling that you have. I first shot this with the 1022 is just a simple 2-point sling. But shooting standing, that's a big one. And then I didn't specify kneeling on the Qual. I said low profile. Low target profile, meaning low target profile position. A lot of shooting from low target profile position. If you want to shoot from the traditional target, one knee down kneeling, you can. If you want to shoot from double leg kneeling, you can do that too. That's a good thing to know. Double leg kneeling. If you want to shoot from a squatting or crouched position, I think that is also a very, very good choice. As long as the whole point of this or this Qual is to lower your center of gravity and to lower your target profile to the adversary or to whatever you're hunting. Right? Low target profile. Again, you want to shoot it from a squatting position? You want to shoot it from a double leg kneeling or a traditional single leg kneeling? You do you. But many shots are shot from a low profile position, and I think that's important for a modern rifleman to know. Now, if you're the guy that thinks the most practical rifle is a 20-pound bull barrel PRC rifle, I think you'll quickly realize that I don't consider that being a modern rifleman. I don't consider that infinitely practical for most modern shooting scenarios. And you'd have a hard time shooting what I would consider a germane to modern martial application course of fire like this with one of those rifles. Also on this Qual, prone and prone unsupported. Now, if part of your rifle touches the ground, like if you have a 30-round mag in your gun, especially like an AK where it sticks down so far, if the magazine rests on the ground and you want to monopod it, that's okay. I'm talking about prone unsupported as in like no rest. No external to the gun rest, no sandbag, no lead sled, obviously, right? Nothing like that. If you want to shoot off a sandbag or something to zero before you start the course of fire, before you start the training, and you should make sure your rifle's zeroed. It should be zeroed already, but if you need to, you can do that before you start the course of fire. But when you start the course of fire, prone unsupported. Getting into a prone unsupported. And I didn't specify what kind of prone. There are many different kinds of prone, especially for modern applications. Urban prone, if you want to shoot one or two of the things in prone in urban prone because it's easier to get into or out of, or you just want to shoot in the urban prone, you're a law enforcement officer, and urban prone is really applicable to you and your more dynamic environment, by all means. If you have good fundamentals, you can get the good hits from the urban prone. And I think urban prone is a very practical modern shooting position, especially in that kind of fetal type position. If you do end up getting injured, that's a position you may find yourself in, that urban prone position. So, offhand, low profile position, whether squatting, kneeling, whatever, some kind of low target profile position, and a prone on the ground position, whether that's modern urban prone or the more traditional prone, whatever you want. There's some shooter liberty in this. Also in the Qual is movement and getting into and out of position. It's great if you can shoot a really tiny group in prone. It really is. But if you can't get into and out of a prone position, right, then it's not super applicable. If you can't move into a good low profile position hastily, if you can't transition from standing to low profile, like standing to kneeling, kneeling to prone, and vice versa, it's not super practical. It's not super useful. Kneeling can be a pretty uncomfortable position. So even if you thought something was going to happen, you're probably not staying in a kneeling position or a squatting position for, 2 hours. Which, if you've ever stood on a perimeter, which is very, very germane to today's modern type things, it's not all John Wick. Like, sometimes you're on a perimeter for hours waiting for something to happen. You might want to move into a round cover, move into a good kneeling position, but it's going to be pretty miserable if you're in a kneeling position for hours and hours at a time. So knowing how to move into and out of these different positions, I think, is absolutely applicable and germane to a modern rifleman. Also, knowing how to manipulate your weapon. So some of these stages will be shot starting the course of fire in condition 3. And that's a loose term, and you can use other terms, but what I'm talking about is ammunition in the gun, but no round in the chamber. For the obvious rifle, the M16 or AR-15 or M4 pattern, condition 3, if I remember correctly from my Marine Corps days. Loaded, magazine inserted, bolt forward, chamber empty, safety on, ejection port cover closed. That'd be condition 3. You start in condition 3, so you start without a round in the chamber, and when you go to shoot, let's say you're going from a standing to a kneeling, you charge that weapon, you get that weapon ready to fire, so you would load it. You need to manipulate the manual safety, and deliver hits on target. I say if you, because some weapons platforms, like if the gun is unloaded and charged or whatever in different configurations, the safety won't work. If you're running like a bolt action, like if you're running a Muzzle and a Gant, you're probably just going to run the bolt and not have to worry about the safety. But you get the idea. You have to make that weapon from what you might call, in modern terms, from patrol ready to firing while moving into position. I think that's a modern germane skill. Why? Because I'm not saying you should, but many people store their guns without a round in the chamber. For many When I was in Iraq many times, that was the SOP, that was the standard operating procedure for like when you were inside the wire. You would magazine inserted, but the chamber was empty to stop negligent discharges. Many people, if you're carrying a truck on, or law enforcement officers, that'll be their SOP. They have to carry their gun with magazine inserted, but no round in the chamber. Even when I was a private contractor, that was often the SOP. You would have to, if something happened, get that gun ready. You should train that way. You should train to, I've got to shoot. Let me get this weapon ready to go and let me get into position and do those things in a smooth and efficient manner. Also, in this course of fire, there will be transitions of targets, shooting from both horizontal, vertical transitions of varying angles, right? So up, down, left, right. Those kinds of transitions, and also follow-up shots. So multiple hits on a given target, which I think is germane to a modern rifleman, both of those skills. So that is what is on the modern rifleman's training. DIY, do it yourself. Get out there. If you're already a rifleman, keep those skills sharp. If you want to be a rifleman, if you want to tap into that rich heritage of being a rifleman, protecting life and liberty. I don't consider this stuff belonging to me. I consider everything that I have belongs to God. And this is no different. You want to get this Qual, you want to get this course of fire, and you want to adopt it for your church security team. By all means. You're like I was, and you're the commander of a tactical team, and you want to do this as one of, or your modern rifle qualification. Run with it. Use the training and experience I've been blessed with to bless others. I don't do this podcast primarily to help me. I do it to help you guys. So again, consider it open source. Consider this course of fire open source. Just like the Armed Citizens course of fire, the CCW do-it-yourself training that I developed, right? Probably not great marketing, probably not going to make me a millionaire. I'm okay with that. And I do this primarily to help you guys. I will put the course of fire out there. In fact, I believe it will fit in the show notes, as well as the scoring, what it means to pass or fail, right? Because it's not just a give me. What it means to be a sharpshooter, what it means to be an expert rifleman. Oh, and I should mention, it's 25 rounds total, so it's not like you got to go spend a bunch of money to do this and train and stay proficient with this. Especially if you, and I would encourage you to do this with, an actual fighting rifle, an actual modern rifle, or your actual go-to rifle, whether it's a scout rifle or a lever action or whatever it is, but probably most likely an AR-15 of some sort or an AR-10 or something like that. I would encourage you to actually shoot it with that weapon, but actually if you want to train, again, it was designed so that you could do this with a 22. Keep your skills sharp with a 22. I hope you'll get out there and run this course of fire. I'll probably do, again, open source if you want to get it and shoot it. I'll try and put all the course of fire, all the training in the show notes. But I'll try and do like I did for the Armed Citizen course of fire if you want to become a patron. Again, I'm not charging you to be able to do this. You can do this for free. If you want it to be more convenient. If you want pictures that explain the course of fire. If you want like a printable PDF with all the stuff on there so you can print it out and take it to the range. Heck, if you want to see how I did it the first 2 times that I ran it. If you want the extra content, consider becoming a patron. Help me help you, right? So anyway, there's almost always a Patreon link in the show notes. You want to become a patron. Yeah, I put a lot of work into this. I literally was out there on the literally freezing cold ground. Here's the thing about me. I'm not a big cold weather guy. I'll do it. I mean, I live in northern Idaho. I lived in Alaska. I'll do it, but I would rather shoot, and a little just side note about me if you care. I would rather train and shoot outside on a range in over 100 degrees than under 50 degrees. I much prefer heat to cold. That's because I'm Italian, or I grew up in the South, or I've done much of my gunfighting stuff in the desert Southwest or the Middle East. I couldn't say. But I much prefer the heat to the cold. I was out there working for you guys. Even got a little bit bloody in the training. Again, this is to help the community, to help you guys. So hopefully you'll get out there and actually do the training. Hopefully this will either rekindle or light a fire under you to actually be a rifleman, not just a dude with a rifle. There's plenty of dudes with rifles. This is not Dude with Gun podcast. This is gunfighter life. You want to be a gunfighter. You want to be an actual rifleman. It's not enough. I hate to burst your bubble. It's not enough to have a gun. It's not enough to wear a tactical t-shirt with an American flag patch on it. That's not going to make you effective. It's not even enough to dump a bunch of extra money on Amazon on optics and lasers and have a full multicam range get up. That's not what makes one effective with his rifle. I'm not going to recite the entire Rifleman's Creed for you guys here now, but what does it say in the Rifleman's Creed? It's the hits that count. And again, that target don't care. That target is honest. It doesn't care how much money you spent on your rifle. It doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't care if you feel like a warrior or feel like you're really good with a rifle. The target's honest. Get out and show that target who's boss. Get out and be a rifleman. With that, I'm going to wrap up this show. Tactical tip and tactical verse of the day. Tactical tip of the day, you do want to a little bit of camo on your go-to rifle. One of the things you can just spray paint it, which I've certainly painted guns. I'm not against painting guns. You get a specific gun paint like Cerakote, which I've had done, or Durabake, Duracoat, those kind of things, which can work quite well, or just regular old spray paint. You can certainly do that. What you can also do is that self-adhesive athletic tape. You can buy a bunch of it pretty affordably. And you can wrap certain sections of your gun in that. Now, obviously, don't wrap it on anything that's going to interfere with the operation of the rifle. And if you do and you go out and train, you'll know that. Don't wrap it around the charging handle, right? Or the ejection port or whatever, where the magazine goes, any of the controls. Like, let's say you want to wrap it around the fore end and parts of the buttstock or the bottom of a magazine to kind of break up the outline of that rifle. That self-adhesive athletic tape is a quick, affordable, and not permanent way to do it. If you decide you don't like it, you can just take it off. Also, it has the added benefit of, like I mentioned, it was 20-something degrees. If that rifle is super cold, grabbing a super cold piece of steel or aluminum, it's really unpleasant if you have to grab that and hold on to it for any length of time. This kind of tape helps with that. Also, if you're shooting out in the desert Southwest, if you're training out in Vegas and the regular temperature is 110 degrees, what do you think that black rifle laying in the sun's temperature is? It can help with either one of those extremes. And it's a cheap, affordable, effective way to camo your gun. They probably even make it in something that looks like multicam if you want to be super cool. Maybe even black multicam. You want to be just next level. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. And I already gave you a few to start. Here's another one for you warriors out there. The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but deliverance is of the Lord. End of Proverb 21. But deliverance is of the Lord. I am blessed to be on the right side of the dirt today. There are many good men that died over there in those desert sands. Or many cops that didn't make it on the mean streets of L.A. I'm not going to stand here and say that I made it because of me, because of how awesome I am, because God chose to deliver me, because He obviously has a purpose for me, because God does nothing that's superfluous. For whatever reason, He chose to save me. My deliverance is not in sword or shield. It's not in a combat handgun or a fighting rifle. My deliverance is in God, is in Christ Jesus, my Lord. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.